Wnba, Lexie Brown's not okay with it. Lexie Brown took it upon herself to stand up and speak out on behalf of a lot of people who might have been afraid to. And you got Breanna Stewart talking about she don't believe that.
Inside the ruthless, high-stakes world of billion-dollar labor battles, there's a moment every union fears. It's the instant when solidarity fractures, when the polished message of unity collapses, and the people at the bottom start questioning the people at the top. It happens when everyday members study the numbers for themselves and realize the wealthy power brokers speaking on their behalf might be safeguarding their own interests instead of protecting the group. For months, the Wnba Players Association carefully crafted a narrative of total alignment. Through coordinated media appearances and bold strike authorization votes, they projected strength, sending a clear warning to team owners that the players were prepared to sacrifice the 2026 season if necessary. The message was simple: we stand together. But with the March 10th deadline looming and the pressure intensifying, that united front is beginning to splinter. Ownership's calculated strategy appears to have done exactly what it was designed to do: apply just enough heat to test the foundation, and now tension is surfacing behind closed locker room doors. At the center of this growing unrest are the players who don't have massive endorsement deals or long-term financial cushions, the women earning minimum salaries, the veterans on restrictive contracts, the athletes whose careers have a short runway and no safety net. For them, this isn't a symbolic standoff, it's a financial gamble with real consequences. And that's where the shift begins. This isn't just a negotiation anymore, it's an internal reckoning. Lexie Brown has emerged as one of the most prominent voices in this moment. She represents a large portion of the league, the skilled, experienced professionals who aren't multimillionaires, who don't have global signature sneaker deals, and who can't afford to treat a lost season as a political statement. She's a veteran guard still playing under an older contract structure, focused on maximizing a limited earning window before time inevitably catches up with every athlete. Her public comments didn't just raise eyebrows, they disrupted the union's carefully constructed strategy. By speaking candidly, she exposed the widening gap between leadership's long-term vision and the immediate financial reality facing many players. In doing so, she forced an uncomfortable conversation into the open. Who is this strategy truly serving? Layered on top of that tension are complex questions about influence, leadership, and perceived conflicts of interest among some of the league's biggest stars. And looming over everything is the undeniable economic force surrounding Caitlin Clark, an impact so massive that it has reshaped revenue conversations across the league. How that new financial gravity is handled may ultimately define this entire standoff. What we're witnessing isn't just a labor dispute, it's a power struggle within the players themselves. A clash between idealism and urgency, between long-term leverage and short-term survival. The unity was loud, the cracks are louder, and now the real battle isn't just between players and owners, it's happening inside the union.
With its own players that it's representing, Lexie Brown is not happy with the moves that Breanna Stewart has been pulling, Nafisa Collier and Wnba. Lexie Brown's not okay with it. Lexie
Brown has made it crystal clear she is not on board with the direction Breanna Stewart, Nafisa Collier, and Wnba are taking, and instead of whispering her concerns behind closed doors, she chose to air them publicly. That decision alone sent shockwaves through the league. When a respected veteran directly calls out members of her own union's executive committee by name, that's not subtle disagreement, that's a public vote of no confidence. Brown's message, that's to strip to its core, is simple. This leadership does not speak for everyone. She's signaling that the current strategy doesn't reflect the priorities of the league's middle tier, the players who aren't insulated by massive endorsement deals or long-term financial security. In her view, the demands being pushed across the table aren't just ambitious, they're unrealistic, and by escalating the fight in front of cameras and microphones, she believes the leadership is gambling with an entire season. Almost overnight, Brown has become the face of a growing internal resistance. She represents a segment of the league that feels cornered, not by ownership, but by its own negotiators. For weeks, tension has been building quietly inside locker rooms. Now it's out in the open, and this isn't just emotional frustration, it's financial. At the heart of the divide is the owner's latest collective bargaining proposal. and the executive committee has framed it as inadequate, an offer that falls short of what the players deserve. But many rank-and-file athletes didn't just take that summary at face value. They read the details themselves. They saw guaranteed base salary increases, they saw structural changes, and most notably, they saw a major concession: full housing coverage for players next season. For someone earning around $90,000 a year in a high-cost city, that benefit isn't symbolic, it's transformative. And a rent alone can consume a massive chunk of income. Removing that burden is the equivalent of a substantial raise. So while union leadership calls the proposal disrespectful, a growing number of players are quietly asking a different question. Is this actually a step forward? That's the tension ripping through the league right now. The anger that was once aimed squarely at billionaire owners is starting to shift inward. Players who feel financially vulnerable are questioning whether the strategy being pushed at the top truly reflects their reality. What began as a united front against ownership is evolving into something far more complicated, a debate over risk, representation, and who this fight is really for. And Lexie Brown just made sure that debate can no longer stay behind closed doors.
In a near unanimous vote. Now, that let it be known, it's very clear there are a lot of people, players, who are fine with the numbers and with the offer that the WNBA has sent, who want to sign and move on.
Behind the scenes, there's a growing group of players who have looked at the latest proposal and quietly said, "This works." They're comfortable with the numbers, they're satisfied with the terms, they want to sign the deal and get back to basketball. And here's the explosive part: they're accusing their own leadership of overreaching. That shift alone is devastating to the union's bargaining power. Once internal unity cracks, leverage evaporates. The owners don't have to apply pressure anymore, but they can simply observe as disagreement spreads within the players' ranks. For many mid-tier athletes, the situation feels painfully straightforward. They see guaranteed salary bumps, they see housing fully covered, they see stability. From their perspective, rejecting that package in favor of a prolonged standoff feels like playing with fire. The fear isn't abstract, it's personal. Missed paychecks, mounting bills, careers that don't last forever. But the frustration bubbling up in locker rooms sounds something like this. We're being asked to risk everything today for promises that may not pay off for years. To players without massive endorsement deals or secondary income streams, that's not a philosophical debate, it's survival. A widening perception has taken hold among some athletes that they're caught in a battle that isn't truly about them. They feel squeezed between billionaire ownership groups and millionaire stars who have far more financial insulation, and that perception is fueling resentment. What intensifies the tension even more is the tone coming from parts of the union leadership. While some players are losing sleep over the March 10th deadline, worried about what a canceled season would mean for their livelihoods, certain executives appear far less rattled publicly. Take Breanna Stewart, for example, the vice president of the Players Association and widely regarded as one of the best players on the planet. She's financially secure, with major endorsements and championship accolades. Beyond that, she's also a co-founder of Unrivaled, the new and potentially lucrative 3-on-3 winter league operating outside the Wnba structure. For critics within the player pool, that dual role raises uncomfortable questions. When a top union leader also has ownership ties to an alternative basketball venture, some see a potential conflict, especially in the middle of tense labor negotiations. Even if unintended, the optics alone have sparked debate. So when Stewart addresses the looming deadline with composure, even confidence, it lands differently depending on who's listening. To some, it signals strength. To others, it feels detached from the financial anxiety rippling through teammates who don't share the same safety net. This is no longer just a negotiation with ownership, it's a deep divide over risk tolerance, representation, and trust. And as the clock ticks toward March 10th, the real question isn't just what the owners will do next, it's whether the players can hold themselves together long enough to find common ground.
Done by the proposed deadline. This is what she was quoted as saying. "I don't know," Stewart told Fox Digital after a long, thoughtful pause. "I don't know if a deal gets done by March 10th. Part of me wants to say yes, but part of me is like, negotiations have been really slow going back and forth. There needs to be some serious movement within the next week, literally.
I'm not sure a deal gets done by March 10th. A part of me hopes it does, but negotiations have been moving slowly. There has to be real progress soon." That hesitation says more than the words themselves. Breanna Stewart openly admitting uncertainty about whether an agreement will be reached, or whether the season will even happen, lands very differently depending on who's listening. For her, it's a calculated acknowledgement of a tough negotiation. For others, it sounds like a ticking clock. Watch, the difference is simple. Stewart can absorb the fallout. She's one of the most accomplished players in the world. She has championship rings, endorsement deals, and financial security that stretches far beyond a single WNBA paycheck. If talks collapse and the 2026 season disappears, her lifestyle doesn't. She can shift her focus to Unrivaled, continue collecting major sponsorship money, and remain firmly positioned at the top of the sport's financial ladder. She's negotiating from strength. Oh, but not everyone is. Players like Lexie Brown and many others across the league don't have alternate leagues with ownership stakes waiting in the wings. They don't have signature sneaker contracts cushioning every risk. For them, a canceled season isn't an inconvenience. It's a financial crisis. It's rent. It's savings. It's career momentum that may never return. So when they hear their own union vice president calmly acknowledge that a deal might not come together in time, it doesn't feel strategic, it feels dangerous. This is where the divide becomes impossible to ignore. Some players believe leadership is prepared to push negotiations to the brink, even if it means sacrificing an entire season. Others feel that brinkmanship is being driven by those who can most afford to take the hit. At the center of the conflict is a complicated financial battle that rarely gets explained clearly. Most headlines simplify it. The players want 26%, the owners are resisting. But that shorthand skips the real fight. The disagreement isn't just about a percentage, it's about what that percentage applies to. Union leadership is pushing for 26% of top-line gross revenue. That means revenue before expenses are deducted. Ownership, on the other hand, is operating under the framework of shared basketball income, a narrower definition that accounts for costs and operational structures before splitting the pie. Those two interpretations produce dramatically different numbers, and that's the mathematical fault line splitting the league in half. To some players, demanding a share of gross revenue is a necessary correction, a long overdue claim to the league's full economic growth. To others, it feels unrealistic, a position so aggressive that it risks derailing the entire negotiation. This isn't just about pride or public messaging anymore. It's about financial definitions buried in corporate accounting, definitions that could determine whether players receive steady paychecks or face a lost season. As March 10th approaches, the standoff isn't just between athletes and owners, it's between risk and security, between those who can afford to wait and those who can't.
Being negotiated, the PA is asking for gross, and the league, the WNBA, is asking to deal in an SBI, which is shared basketball income, where you negotiate how much money goes into that pot and that's shared to the player sheet.
At the heart of this battle is a financial definition that neither side is willing to budge on. The players are pushing for a percentage of gross revenue, every dollar that flows into the league before expenses are taken out. That includes national TV deals, ticket sales, merchandise, sponsorships, everything at the top line. Ownership, however, is insisting on a shared basketball income model similar to the NBA structure. Under that framework, specific revenue streams are agreed upon, and key operating costs, arena leases, charter flights, staff salaries, production expenses, are deducted before the split happens. That difference isn't minor, it's the entire war. If owners agreed to hand over 26% of total gross revenue without accounting for expenses, they'd be committing to paying players first and absorbing losses themselves. In practical terms, they would be writing checks even if the league wasn't profitable. From a business standpoint, that's not just aggressive, it's unsustainable, and that's why this feels like an immovable object meeting an unbreakable wall. Ownership is not going to sign a deal that locks them into what they view as a structurally losing position. Not now, not under pressure, not ever. But here's where the situation turns even more complicated. The revenue surge at the center of these negotiations didn't happen in a vacuum. The league's recent explosion in media rights value, reportedly in the billions, came during the rise of Caitlin Clark. Her arrival drove ratings, ticket demand, and national conversation to unprecedented levels. That economic spike is now the foundation for the players' 26% demand, and that's where critics see irony. Some veteran players were openly critical of the Clark media frenzy last season. There were complaints about coverage imbalance, frustration over fan behavior, tension about attention distribution, yet now, the same revenue wave fueled by that spotlight is being cited as justification for a significantly larger financial share. To some observers, and to certain players within the league, that contrast feels uncomfortable. They see a push for superstar-level compensation built largely on an economic boom sparked by a 22-year-old point guard whose rise was, at times, publicly scrutinized by peers. Meanwhile, players in the league's middle tier are watching all of this unfold old with growing unease. For them, this isn't about symbolic victories or legacy negotiations. It's about guaranteed income. It's about housing being covered. It's about financial certainty in a career that doesn't last long. That's why voices like Lexie Brown's resonate. There's a segment of the league that would prefer to secure the current offer, lock in raises, accept structural gains, and avoid risking a canceled season. Now agents are more involved. Locker rooms are divided, leadership is under scrutiny, and ownership, they're holding firm, aware that internal fractures weaken the players' leverage by the day. So here's the real question. Is this a necessary hardline negotiation that will ultimately reset the league's financial future? Or is it a miscalculated gamble that risks tearing apart both the union and the season itself? Does Breanna Stewart's role as co-founder of Unrivaled create complicated optics in the middle of these talks? Are mid-tier players justified in prioritizing guaranteed stability over long-term revenue projections? And is it fair or unfair to tie the current revenue debate so closely to Caitlin Clark's economic impact? This isn't a simple labor dispute. It's a high-stakes collision of math, power, optics, and timing. Drop your sharpest analysis below. Where do you stand? Fine, if you want deeper breakdowns on the real business mechanics behind professional sports, the leverage plays, the financial models, the internal politics, make sure you're locked in. This channel doesn't recycle surface level headlines. We dissect the numbers, we question the strategy, we follow the power shifts. I'll see you in the next breakdown.